she looked at me and she said, "You know what, Justin, you're not the father that I hoped you'd be."
Wow.
Yeah.
What a moment.
And I was like, oh, wow. I was not expecting that. I was expecting her to say, well, we can figure this out.
Yeah, we'll work it out. Exactly.
Oh, boy. And I've gone, oh, wow. And as I'm sort of recovering from that and coming back from it, she said something along the lines of, actually, now that I think about it, you haven't quite met my expectations as a husband either. And
as if your day wasn't going to get any worse.
I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Oh. And I just knew something had to change.
Welcome to the Legacy Collective podcast. My name's Brendan and I'm from School Fun Run. Today I'm talking to Dr. Justin Coulson about family life. It's a pretty long and interesting chat, so please make a cup of tea, sit back and enjoy. So tell me about Happy Families and what it is that you guys do.
I think the backstory is probably the most important thing here.
Yep.
What we do is, by the by, for now, it's called Happy Families because I was not in one. So I was raised by wonderful, loving parents. I can only say great things about my own parents, but I lived a pretty comfy life as a teenager, and once I was a bit older and I was married and I had my own children, I was fundamentally incompetent, I think is what I would say. I think that I was a bit of a man-child. So I'm currently writing a book about boys and how to make sure your boy does not become a man-child. And at the very core of it, my suspicion, my belief is that you become a man when you stop taking more than you're giving.
Okay.
In other words, when you become a man, you give more than you take. So when I'm a teenager living at home with my parents, or a 10-year-old living at home with my parents, I'm the recipient of everything, right? Mm-hmm. And the government gives education to me, or my parents pay for my education. Sure. I live in their home. They provide the food. I just take.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of men just take as well. They haven't learned that you become a man when you're able to do things for others, when you're able to provide for yourself and then your family and then the community more broadly, and then you pay taxes and contribute to people you don't even know.
Sure.
And that's when you become a man.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think I was a man child. Maybe I'm being harsh to myself, but I was immature.
Yeah.
I had a wife. I was working. I was a radio announcer, and I was pretty good at my job. I'd show up into the radio station. I was working at Brisbane's B105.
You do that well.
Yeah,
well, you haven't lost it.
All of today's best music while you work. And I'd give away cash, and I'd show up at concerts and be backstage, and the record companies would take me out for dinner and Brisbane's best restaurants and that kind of thing. And I was kind of living a really nice life.
But you must have worked hard to get there. There's a lot of people that want to be radio announcers, and you don't just turn up and get the job. So I do think you're being a bit hard on yourself.
Yeah, so conscientious enough, and committed and very one track, but not particularly well balanced. Like I expected that since I was the breadwinner and we had a child at home and then a second child, that my wife would take care of everything else. So there was no... It's not that I wasn't a contributor at home, but I didn't really take any thought as to what needed to go on there because that wasn't my job.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, once our eldest was about 3, I discovered that, in fact, probably from about the time she was 2, I discovered that she was quite annoying. And I mean, kids, right?
Yeah,
they don't do as they're told. They throw their food on the floor. They won't go to bed when they're supposed to go to bed. They're annoying. You can't have those nice, comfortable Saturday morning brunches or.
And sorry, did you say that was your eldest when your eldest got to 3?
Yeah. So
that was the first time around. Obviously, being your eldest child, you'd never had a 3-year-old before. No. So this was a learnt experience for you.
Yeah. And what I discovered about myself is I was actually pretty angry. Like I had a really short wick. I had a very high level of expectation. And when my daughter didn't do as she was told, I just got mad.
Sure.
In fact, I remember one time I was at my grandmother's house. She's passed away now, but we're going back 25 years now. And I was at my grandmother's house and my little toddler was doing something that I didn't like, and I reprimanded her and threatened her and did all the things that parents that don't really know better do.
Yeah.
And I mean, even some parents who do know better still do those things in their weaker moments. And I remember my grandma saying something like, "Justin, you're very harsh towards Chanel." And I looked at her with pride and said, "You have to be, Nan, otherwise they'll walk all over you." Like I really felt like it was my duty as a father to lay down the law.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've been in radio for 10 years. We've got a 3-year-old. Now we've got a brand new second child. I get home from work on a Saturday arvo. So I did 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. I've done my 6 a.m. to midday shift on the Saturday, and I was exhausted. I've got to be awake at 4:30 to get to the radio station for 5:30 to sound awake and happy to be on air at 6 a.m.
Yeah, sure.
And no one's very happy to be on the radio.
I've always wondered how that happens because it's true, yeah.
And the night before, I'd been out doing some promotional stuff with the radio station, so I'd had about 3 hours sleep.
Yeah.
So I get home, it's Saturday afternoon, beautiful, perfect spring Brisbane afternoon, sun's beating down, it's warm, and Kylie says to me, Kylie's my wife, she says, I've got to go out and do some errands. I've just put the baby to sleep. I need you to put the 3-year-old down, Chanel down, in about half an hour, and then I'll be home shortly after that. And I said, well, I'm really tired. Could you put her to sleep? Because I need to have a nap. I'll be a really good dad all afternoon, but I need a nap. And she said, no, you're capable.
You can do it.
You can do it.
I believe in you.
I was like, all right, that'll be fine. See ya. And she said, I promise I'll be back before anyone wakes up.
Yeah.
I said, all right, that's all good. So she left. And over the subsequent... honestly, I mean, this is a really important story to tell, but I really hate telling the story because I didn't cover myself in glory. In fact, I did everything that I'm not supposed to do.
Sure.
I was a poorly educated, I finished year 12, but I didn't get any grades that were worth talking about. And then I went straight into radio. So I had no education around anything. And over the subsequent half an hour, I just got madder and madder and madder at a daughter who was 3 years old and felt like she was too big for a daytime nap. And since it wasn't mum doing it, it was dad doing it, she thought she could get away with it. Until eventually it had escalated to the point where she was screaming at me and I was screaming at her and I was squeezing her. And at one point I carried her into her bedroom and threw her onto the bed and said, you're going to stay there. And I've slammed the door shut and she's behind the door using her heels as hammers going bang, 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 bang. Let me out. You're the worst dad in the world. And I'm shoving her out of the way with the door so I can pick her up and yell at her and whack her and put her back into bed. And I mean, it was brutal. It was so shameful. It pains me to talk about it. If I saw somebody doing what I had done, I would tackle them to the ground and sit on them and call the police. It was horrendous. But in the moment, it felt natural, necessary, and completely justified. And this is the awful thing about it, right? It seemed like I had no other option. I cracked. She needed to do as she was told. I'm tired. She's tired. She just can't tell. I'm bigger than her. I'm smarter than her. She needs to do as she's told. Oh, she's not going to do it. Well, I'm going to make her do it. It's that kind of thing. I remember holding the door closed as she screamed and wailed. And I'm thinking, if she wakes up her sister, there's going to be hell to pay. She's already in so much. I've already heard her, but it's going to get worse if she wakes up her sister. And then I had this thought. I remember specifically thinking, now remember, this is in the early 2000s before we had language for this, but I said to myself, this is not my fault. She made me do it. And of course, you hear that today and the alarm bells start ringing. You're like, oh, domestic abuse. This is heavy. And I instantly started to argue with myself. I'm having this self-justification conversation and I've gone to myself, I remember a thing that my dad said to me once. And it really pierced me in this moment. He goes, Justin, the only time a father should ever lay his hands on his child is to bless them.
Wow.
And I'm like, I'm missing the mark here.
Yeah.
She fell asleep on the carpet behind the door. Eventually the crying stopped and I was supposed to go and have my nap. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you've been really upset about something and then you think, well, I might just lay down and sleep it off now. I wasn't going to sleep. I was pretty worked up.
Yeah.
So I stepped out into the backyard and the sun's coming down and our dysfunctional vegetable garden full of weeds is over in the corner. And I remember thinking, Justin, you're a bad father. It was like a punch to the guards. You're actually getting this so wrong. And within seconds of thinking that, across the back fence and in a neighbouring street, sort of down a handful of houses, I hear this dad and this toddler. And the dad's yelling at the kids saying, you need to go to bed. It's time for your sleep. And the toddler's saying, but I'm not tired. And I listened over the course of about 3 or 4 minutes to this escalation that was a microcosm of what I'd just been through. And hearing it just made me sick to my stomach. It was terrible. And my wife came home about an hour and a half later and she was surprised to see that I was still awake. And I said, we need to talk.
Yeah.
And I just laid it all out. I said, you left I lost it. I did this. I did that. I smacked. I called names. I literally squeezed our child and threw her onto her bed. I shoved her in the door. Like I mapped it out. And
well, I was sitting here. I can actually see how this is affecting you even today.
Yeah.
You still haven't. Like this is still painful for you, even 25 years later.
Well, yeah, it is. And my wife Kylie is a really compassionate, kind, thoughtful. She's such a good person. One of the best people I've ever met in my life, and I definitely don't deserve her. And she sat there, and I was expecting her to be gentle and kind and compassionate and all those things because that's what she'd always been. And instead, she looked at me and she said, "You know what, Justin? You're not the husband. You're not the father that I hoped you'd be."
Wow.
Yeah.
What a moment.
And I was like, oh, wow. Because I was not expecting that. I was expecting her to say, well, we can figure this out.
Yeah, we'll work it out. Exactly.
Oh, boy. And I've gone, oh, wow. And as I'm sort of recovering from that and coming back from it, she said something along the lines of, actually, now that I think about it, you haven't quite met my expectations as a husband either. And
as if your day wasn't going to get any worse.
I was like, oh. And I just knew something had to change. And so over the subsequent months, I quit my radio career.
Yeah.
And I tried to go back to school, but it was late in the year, number one. And number two, I had been a terrible high school student. My parents sacrificed to send me to a grammar school, and I got in the bottom 15% of the state. Like I was not a good student. And so I enrolled in TAFE.
Yeah.
And I signed up to do just a course so that I could figure out what to do with my life. And I had
Did you have any idea?
Yeah, I knew that I needed to change my life, get out of radio and figure out how to make my family right.
But you didn't know how to do that specific? Like you
I
didn't know
wanted me to get help, but I was too prideful to go and see a therapist.
Yeah.
Because real men don't, apparently.
Yeah.
That stigma still exists in 2025.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Although it is being broken down.
I agree with all of that, yeah. For sure.
So rather than going and doing the work myself with somebody, I decided that I'd go and study psychology, because if I could study psychology at university, I'd figure it out. Right? So it wasn't really that I was going to go and do research. I was going to go and do me-search. Yeah. But
that's a big call from someone that's gone from the bottom 15% in the state to I'm going to study psychology.
Well, if I could get into uni, right?
Yeah.
And I've gone from bottom 15% of the state to being high-status radio announcer hanging out backstage with the world's biggest stars like Gwen Stefani and Ronan Keating and whoever else. And so I've had this – I'm suddenly a TAFE student.
Yeah.
With 2 kids, and then we had our 3rd child while I finished TAFE, and I went to the University of Queensland, got in to do just an arts degree and then transferred into psychology. So I did my 4-year psychology degree and graduated with a first-class honours in psychological science.
Well done.
Which blew our minds because we thought I was dumb. But I wasn't dumb, I was just unmotivated.
I was about to say that exact thing. You just needed to find a reason to do it. Yeah.
And I fundamentally believe that anyone can do anything if they've got the reason.
Sure.
And that was my reason. So I finished my degree. We had our 4th child while I was doing the honours year of my undergraduate psychology degree. So now I've done 5 years of full-time study. I'm working 3 part-time jobs. I'm working at Colorado selling shirts and shoes. I'm working on a furniture truck, doing furniture removals and driving interstate trucks during the uni holidays, and I'm doing some stuff at TAFE because after I finished at TAFE, I stayed on working for them a little bit as well. And I said to my wife, after 5 years of full-time study and literally being gone all the time, and now with 4 kids, I said, I've got some really good news and some really bad news. The good news is I've got a psychology degree with first-class honours. Yeah. The bad news is it's worthless. You can't do much with a psychology degree unless you do a master's or a PhD. Okay. Which means more study. Yeah. And she sort of said, I'm not sure that I signed on for this, but it's getting pretty serious. We've got 4 kids. So we left Brisbane, moved to Wollongong, and I did a PhD down there. Yeah. And it's such a great experience. It was a great university. I had a great experience with my research, my supervisors, and loved it. We had our 5th child while I was doing my PhD. And they're all girls, by the way.
And all these girls, they have a lot to thank the first child for, because none of this would have happened if it wasn't for nap time, right? Well, it may have, but that was a bit of a catalyst,
Yeah, I don't know if our family would have made it. Yeah. I finished university. I became a university lecturer. But what I found was that I was happiest when I was not sitting there doing the research, but rather telling people about it, like running university lectures.
Seeing the
and
impact
so on.
of the research, I
Right,
guess.
yeah. And I started writing talks, giving talks, and I started writing some articles that appeared in the press, and I had that media background, and I seemed to just want to talk about what I'd learned because it had changed my family. And that's how Happy Family was born. I gave my dad a call after Kylie and I had worked out that this is what we wanted to do. And I said, Dad, university is probably going to be a pretty safe and good way for me to make a living for the rest of my life. But I feel, the word that I used was called. I feel called. I feel an intrinsic or maybe an extrinsic call to go and do something else with my life. And that is to help other families to be happier.
Yeah.
Because what I've done in my family, it sort of defies the odds, and it's been the best thing that I could have done. And I said, here's the thing. I don't know anything about running a business. I've got a PhD in psychology.
Yeah.
And I've got a few months of income saved up because we're planning on going this way. And this is one of my favourite stories to tell, by the way, because I just said to Dad, if this goes pear-shaped, if the bottom falls out, do you reckon that Kylie and the kids and I could come and move into your garage just so that we can get back on our feet and I can go back into uni or figure out what to do next?
Yeah.
And Dad, like this is the essence of resilience, right? People think resilience is you just get up and you grit your teeth and tough your way through it. Yeah. But the people who are most resilient are the people who have, I'm going to get weepy again.
Oh, don't worry, I'm getting there too. Like, we'll do it together.
They're the people who have somebody in their corner that says, if you fall, I've got you.
Yeah.
And Dad just said, no.
Yeah.
No. and I was like, oh. And he said, I'm not going to let you live in my garage. We'll do whatever we need to do to help you to get back on your feet if it doesn't work out. And then he said, but I believe in you. And I think you should do it. It sounds like a really good idea. And I said, do you know how? And he said, no, I'm a furniture removalist. I don't know how you're supposed to become a professional speaker, but I think you should do it.
So just in that moment, did you feel let down that he didn't want to let you live in the garage, or did you feel inspired that he was like, you're not going to need that, but if you do, we're going to do something better for you than live in the garage?
When somebody says to you, I'm here, there's hardly, I don't know that there's much more that's more reassuring in the world than hearing that.
Yeah.
I'm here. I've got you.
Yeah.
It's profound.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. So helpful.
And I know, I do, obviously I want to get back to the story because it's amazing. But I did want to ask you a question about how overcomplicated parenting, well, everything is in life these days. It's just so complicated. And I wanted to ask you a question. If you boiled parenting down to just a couple of paragraphs on what makes a good parent, what would that look like?
It's just three things.
Yeah, what are they?
It's literally that simple. We make things so hard. It's just three things. And you know the great irony? It took me 8.5 years of university study to figure out that it's just three things. Like, I can give you a list of 400.
Yeah, sure. But the foundation, because the reason I stopped you there was it sounds very much like your dad was right there in that moment, like being what a good parent is. And it was really simple, right? Like, it wasn't overcomplicated. That's why I just wanted to pause and ask you this question, because I feel like your dad's right there right now in what a good parent is.
Yeah. So the technical terms for what the first thing is, the technical terms would be relatedness. It's otherwise known as emotional availability. And it's this reciprocal wearing connection with one another. So my definition of connection is feeling seen, heard, and valued.
Okay.
So if we can be in relationship with our kids and they with us in a way that we always feel seen, heard, and valued, and that's probably impossible all the time, but for the majority of time we see each other, we hear each other, we value each other. That's number one. That means that when your kids want you, you put down the phone or you turn off the lawnmower or you stop what you're doing and you look them in the eyes and you listen to what they've got to say. You know, if there's a need to cross the road, you've got to stop, look and listen.
Yes.
It's the same with our kids. They're literally trying to cross the road of life and they need us to be there with them to stop, look and listen. You do that and you're being emotionally available. You're being present for them. You're in relationship. The second thing is, the technical term for it is competence. Underpinning competence means I need to have structures and frameworks so that I know what to do and how to be well socialized, how to live in the world, how to get along with people, how to make our household function, to be competent or capable. And a lot of people will actually talk about this as what's known as demandingness or having expectations of kids. That's a less delicate and perhaps a less helpful way of suggesting it. I like it because if you get your systems right, if you get your frameworks right with your kids, the boundaries make sense and you can work with them around that. And then the last thing is what's known as autonomy support. Autonomy support is where you essentially say to somebody, here's what we're looking for and here's why we're looking for it. How do you think we should get there? Or are you even on board with this? And how do we get there?
Getting them to buy into it. Is that what we're saying?
It's buy-in, but it's more than buy-in. It's them feeling volitional and saying, yeah, I'm good with that. So if you were going to talk about screen issues, it's not saying, well, 1 hour a day or no Roblox and that's it. That just doesn't work. That's demanding, but there's no autonomy support there. And I've got a whole system where I teach people how to support autonomy in ways that support those needs and help kids to work. But basically, you be in that relationship with them all the way. When your kids know that you've got their back, they're much more resilient. They do better at school. They're usually better with their peers. In fact, in every area of their lives, every variable, every metric that we can examine, kids do better when they know mum, or dad or carer or some adult in my life, because not every parent is there, but some adult in my life is there for me. That's when they thrive. But they need to have some kind of structure. There's got to be boundaries. The best boundaries, though, are the ones that we build together rather than the ones that are imposed. And that's where the autonomy support comes in.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Let's get back to your dad and the garage.
So dad basically listens.
Yeah.
He says, I got you.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah.
He said, I don't really want you to move back into my house.
Yeah.
Especially with your 5 kids.
Yeah.
That will be a lot.
Are there any more kids coming later in the story, or is that a spoiler alert?
Spoiler alert.
We'll wait to find out.
Yeah. And so
they just seem to be popping up every few paragraphs.
That's right. Yeah. Every couple of years there's another kid. We just look at each other. We're that fertile. And there it is again.
Congratulations.
And so I started. I got cracking. Started giving talks in kindergartens and preschools for like $10 a head, and just trying to figure it out. Got a book deal. Started doing some media stuff, and Happy Families was born. And I called it Happy Families because that's the goal, right? Like if you say to anybody, what do you want for your family? They just say, I want my family to be happy.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Happy Families. About a year after we started, we had our 6th daughter. Yeah. And we pulled up stumps then. We made some permanent decisions to call it quits. Common questions that I get, I'll save you from the embarrassment of asking them, no, we weren't trying for a boy. Yes, we do know how it happens.
And you had a TV.
Yeah, we do have a TV, but we clearly found things that we enjoyed more than TV to do at night time. So, am I allowed to say that on this podcast?
Of course you can.
Yeah, all right.
It's adults.
So that's it, right? We've got our 6 kids. I've been doing this for 15, 16 years, and it's just the greatest privilege of my life to have parents come to me and say, I'm having this challenge. I love my kids so profoundly, but for some reason I don't know how to communicate that to them, or I don't know how to fix this issue and it's making it worse. Yeah. A dad might say, I can't get them to listen to me. No matter how much I talk to them, they won't listen. And or a better example might be, I can't understand my kids. They're not listening to me. Yeah. Which is my favourite one, because I get to say, well, I thought if you wanted to understand someone, you needed to listen to them. But or a dad will say, or a mum will say, I want to stop smacking, or I want to stop yelling. And they share these things that are not socially acceptable with me, and they trust me to be able to help them to get through it. And when I get one of those emails from a parent who says, I listened to your podcast, or I went to your workshop, or I read your book, and my family is happier. Yeah.
You'd light up. Yeah, absolutely, you would. Yeah. You know, if I could digress for a second and just put a personal story in here, I lost, as the listeners would well know, I lost a partner to cancer 10 years ago when I was 36, and she was 36 as well. And she died happy. She died in my arms, happy. And it blew my mind because how could she be happy? Like, I wasn't happy. You know, I had so much stuff going for me, and I wasn't happy. And she died from cancer, and cancer took everything from her, you know, literally everything. Her education was worthless. Her looks were gone, her hair was gone. Just any opportunity you can think of was gone. Now, she had a son and he was 11, and she was never going to see him graduate school. She was never going to see him get married. She was never going to see him buy a home, start a family, none of that stuff. And on the face of it, you would think to yourself, that's a very sad situation. And in some ways, of course, it was.
Yeah, tragic, yeah.
But I realised after she passed that the reason she could die happy and the reason that I wasn't happy was because I was distracted by so many things that weren't my real legacy or my real life. And the fact that she had a son and the fact that she loved that boy and that he loved her, at the end of the day, that's what she needed. Like, she felt like a good mother, and she felt like she was leaving in this world a great, he's now a great man, but at the time a great boy. And that was really, when you boil it down, that's all she needed. So when I hear you say that you feel lit up when you help a parent and a child connect in a way they haven't been able to connect before, I know how important that is, because I know in the final breaths of our life that nothing means more than the legacy you leave behind. And it's not your car, and it's not your education, and it's not the jewelry, and it's not the books. It's the meaning of your life. And so often that is tangible in the children that we raise. And so I can totally understand why you get an amazing feeling for bringing those connections. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Can I ask, have you remained involved in that young man's life?
So I have. We had a great relationship that lasted many years when his mum was alive, and that was a big thing. Like, the listeners, she was on 60 Minutes several times. Her name was Alicia Neve, and so she had a lot of media support during her cancer journey. So people would know Jack from that story if they followed the story at the time. And we had a great bond, and after she passed, Jack wanted to stay with me because I was the person that he knew.
Wow.
His biological dad lived in Perth in Western Australia, and we live on the Gold Coast, so opposite ends of the country.
Huge move, so disruptive after so much challenge anyway.
And it wasn't just me. Like, the truth is that Alicia's family was heavily involved. So Jack has aunties and uncles, and at that time, grandmother that was, real pillars, like family first kind of attitude in that family.
Yeah.
But Jack's biological dad wanted him, and why wouldn't you? That's your son, right?
Of course, yeah.
So Jack had to go to Perth, and we all went through a period of readjustment because we'd all lost Alicia. In a sense, we'd lost Jack because he wasn't physically available to us anymore. And I've stayed in his life. It sounds crazy because he's not. Like, when I say it like that, I understand your question. Now, like, when you asked me the question, have I stayed in his life? My initial thought was, of course I have. But when I think about it, he's not my biological son. He's not even my stepson in that sense, because I never married Alicia. So he is an individual human being in his own right. But it seems crazy for me not to love him and be in his life. What I would say to you, and I was thinking about this when you were talking about the 3 things it takes to be a good parent. Not that I'm his parent, but I'm certainly someone that loves him very much. Being present in someone's life, I don't think it has to be on a minute-by-minute basis, because my relationship with Jack doesn't happen like that. We don't talk every day, but he knows that I love him, and he knows that I'm here for him. And when we do talk, I do listen to him, and I am very attentive to his life. I know exactly what he's doing. I know exactly what he wants to do. I know who he's with. I know where he's living. I know how he's feeling. So whilst we don't talk regularly, when we do talk, it's meaningful. And I like that.
This goes back to what I was saying about masculinity. I know that the conversation today is not about it, but because I'm writing a book about it, it's really on my mind at the moment. A true man is somebody who adds value to the lives of the people around him. And I think one of the greatest ways to do that is to add value to the life of somebody who can't add value to you. So when I look at that situation, here's this kid. He's He can't add value to you. He can't take you out for lunch or go on a holiday or teach you how to, I don't know, any of those things. He's not going to organise some joint venture for you for your business or anything like that. He's just a kid. He's only going to be, from a purely economic perspective, a drain, emotional and physical and economic and so on. Now, that's a terrible way to look at it, and that's not how we perceive our relationships, of course, but in that pure economic term it is. But what happens with you is, and this is the essence of great masculinity, you say, well, I have the capacity to strengthen and protect and be a bonus in that person's life, and therefore I'm going to do that. And if more men would do that, I think that our society would be healthier. I think that our boys would be in a better position. Australia's stats around single parenting aren't great. There's a fair bit of marriage breakdown in this country. I can't remember exactly what the numbers are at the moment. I've only just done the research and the numbers aren't in my head right this second. But what I do know is that something like 92%, maybe it's 94% of single parents in this country are women. That's a huge number. Yeah. So if a relationship breaks down, the kids go to mum in that single parenting context, which means that in all of those families where this is going on, there is an absence in far too many of them, an absence of healthy, positive male role models. And if more men were willing to step up and say, hey, I'm coaching this team. Does your son want to be part of it? I'd love to be part of his life. Unfortunately, a man does that and everyone looks at him out of the side of their eyes and goes, oh, what's going on with that guy, right?
Sure.
And what a devastating tragedy, because our boys just need it so much. They need those good male role models. I hear your story and I just think this is what we need more of. This is exactly what we're looking for.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. It doesn't, I get what you're saying, but it was just such a natural thing, the way that unfolded. It was just a very organic thing, and it was such a blessing in my life. Like, I'd had a really easy run, like a super easy run, and I was a very hedonistic person, and I wasn't looking to partner with someone that had a child, because to your point, to me at that point, that was just going to be a drain on me as a single young man with the world at my feet.
Yeah,
I wasn't looking for someone that had cancer. Like, these things are not. These weren't on my radar of aspirational things to bring into my life, but I fell in love with this girl, and by default, I fell in love with her son, and the rest of it just happened. So it was none of it was conscious, I guess. It's just where we all ended up, and I'm just so grateful for the fact that unfolded, because it changed who I was as a human being.
It's beautiful, isn't it? It's just beautiful. As a parent of 6 daughters, so many people say to me, oh, you poor thing. I mean, I get it all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get weepy just saying this, but I can't think of a greater privilege.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at these kids and I think, I know how, but how did I get to be so lucky to have these kids in my life? They, in our best moments, and I think this is the essence of really great parenting, is the ability for the best in us to see and talk to and engage with the best in our children. If we can bring our best to the situation and see the best in them even when they don't deserve it, that's when we can really be present for them and be the guide that they need. It's such a privilege. I'm crazy about these kids.
Yeah.
I'm just crazy about them.
Yeah, I can tell. And to think where it all started with that nap time, like it's an incredible arc that you've taken us on there. Like that journey that you've just explained to us is phenomenal. To think about the dad that locks the daughter in the room and she's using it like a drum with her feet trying to get out. And here we are sitting in a room and you're saying it's the greatest privilege you could imagine.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I still have my moments. Like the other day, one of my kids ticked me off and I lost my temper, and you can write all the parenting books in the world. Yeah. It doesn't make you a perfect parent. Mind you, if you buy them, that'll definitely make you better.
Listen, I wanted to ask so many technical questions to you because I think the listeners would love. I almost thought this would go like a Q&A more than a chat. And it just hasn't gone that way. So I don't know. Like if it goes well, maybe I'll get you back and do a Q&A.
We can do it all.
But I don't. That may be for another time. What I'd really like to do, because it's topical for you at the moment, is talk about young men or boys becoming men, and before we turned the mics on, I actually said to you I wanted to ask you a couple of questions that were relevant to me, and they may be a bit abstract. And I said if you didn't want to answer them, you don't have to, but it's just by coincidence one of them is bang on this topic.
Right.
So tribally, if you go back through history, there's always been some kind of rite of passage, right? The young boy has to go out and kill a lion, come home, now you're a man, right? Or you go out and you kill a buffalo, you feed the tribe, and now you've contributed.
Astonishing rites of passage in some places, things that we would call nothing short of abusive and cruel today, but they're centuries old and they've lasted across time and culture.
Absolutely. And that evolved, I guess, to a point where in modern history, you became a man because you moved out of home and you had to make it work because the support network just wasn't what it is today. But now we live in a world where you can be a man-child because that pivotal moment, it seems to just not exist in society anymore. So can you talk a little bit about, if you're happy to, like, what does it mean to no longer have like a rite of passage, and what is a good substitute for that in a modern day family?
So the fundamental structures that used to create masculinity and man have been dismantled over the last 50 or 60 years. I'm not necessarily a traditionalist, but I think that we should be very, very slow to pull apart what has always existed as we pursue the new. There should be caution, and all too often, if you have a really progressive mindset, you look at things that don't make sense. You're like, what are they doing that for? Get rid of it. Let's do this. It just makes sense. And all of a sudden you realize that the structures that underpinned what society was built on are dismantled, and we lose that. My sense is that the teenage boy who's sitting in his room playing Fortnite and vaping is, I guess the metaphor would be like a canary in the coal mine, giving us an indication of where masculinity is going. I had a conversation with a woman a couple of months ago, based on the Gold Coast, incidentally, and which is where we are. And she said to me that she was a divorcee. She was in her early 40s, and we were chatting about what she was going to do with the rest of life. And I asked whether or not another romantic partner was on the horizon, if she was dating anyone. And she said, "No, I don't think that having a man in my life ever again is ever going to be a bonus." And I said, that's a really fascinating thing for you to say, because I feel like you've just dismissed half the population of the world as being not able to contribute to a happy, healthy life for you. And she said, yeah, I've dated a few guys, but they're really only interested in a couple of things. And it seems that if they're in my life, I just have more to worry about, more to think about, more to do. In other words, they're not adding.
Yeah, they're a liability to her in more than an asset, I guess.
Precisely. So there's a guy called Richard Reeves. He wrote a book called Of Boys and Men, and in that book he says that a real man is someone who adds surplus value. Surplus value, this idea that I'm contributing more than I'm taking.
Yeah, sure.
And
my dad always, just to give another metaphor for that, my dad always said to me that life is like a great bonfire, and some people bring enough wood to sustain themselves. Some people don't bring any wood and they enjoy the warmth from others, and some people bring enough wood for themselves and to cover those people. So that's surplus value, right?
And some people probably come along and just take some wood out and take it wherever they want to go.
Take it somewhere else, yeah. But that's, for me, that's always stuck in my mind as a really simple way of leaving an increase of impression wherever you go. You're bringing more wood than you need. Yeah. And there's an easy way to see life, I guess.
So I said to this woman, on your dating profile online, maybe you should just write the words, "Show me your bonus." Which could be interpreted quite poorly.
Many ways, yeah.
Many ways. But the idea is, show me how you're going to be a net positive in my life. Show me what you're going to bring.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have teenage boys, but when I have the opportunity to talk to young men, whether it's in schools or whether it's in various community groups that I'm invited to speak to from time to time, or even if it's just a conversation around the barbecue because we've got friends over and they've brought their family with them, I will say, what are you doing to make a contribution? Because you're certainly taking a lot, right? You're taking your parents' money for school fees and for this and that and the other. And even when they go and get a job because they're teenagers, they're not using that money to make a contribution to anyone around them. They're just going and spending it on Robux or whatever it is that they want to spend, a new skateboard or a surfboard or some clothes or a hat.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying things like, what contributions are you making? How are you adding value in the world, and I usually turn it into an economic conversation because they start to glaze over if I go too hard on this. But I'm like, all the money that you will ever need in the world already exists. It's just in other people's bank accounts, and your job is to work out how to get it out of their bank account and into your bank account. So if you can go and mow the lawn for a neighbour, you've just figured out a way to add value to their life, and they'll actually pay you for it. They'll give you $20 or $50 for mowing the lawn or washing the car or cleaning the gutters or doing whatever. And the kids are like, oh yeah, I like that. And I'm like, similarly, in a relationship with your parents or with your future partner, if you can find a way to consistently contribute more than you take, then you will always be in the right situation. I say to my daughters, when you are old enough to start dating, if you go to an activity, go on a date with the guy who stays back and cleans up. Look for the chair stackers, because they're the ones that are noticing a need and stepping in. They're the ones who are adding surplus value. They're the ones who are saying, here's my bonus, here's what I can offer. They're the ones that have got that initiative and the drive and the willingness to think about others and be considerate. And unfortunately, as we've removed all of these rites of passage, there's some fascinating study from some researchers at Florida State University. They've identified this thing that they call precarious manhood. And what it basically shows is that across time and across cultures, womanhood is something that is given. It's something that is accepted, and it's not taken away. A girl becomes a woman maybe because now she's reached puberty and she's menstruating, or because she has children. But I think that from a womanhood point of view, when I look at all of the women in my life, they all contribute. That's all they do. They give their lives in contribution and service, and they're willing to literally give their lives through labour, for example, to bring another child into the world. No one ever says, oh, you're not a woman anymore because. It's very, maybe there are a couple of very rare exceptional circumstances, but womanhood is not ever questioned. But for men, for boys to become men, there's always this sense that you've got to demonstrate your masculinity. That's what the put your hands into a fire ant nest and keep it there for half an hour is. That's what the go kill a lion or climb to the top of a tower and jump off with the vines attached to your feet. These rites of passage prove your masculinity. Go out and provide. Like if you were in a hunter-gatherer tribe and you went and caught enough food for you for the day and not for anyone else, you're out of the tribe. The real men are the hunters who go out and bring in surplus for everybody and then they don't eat until everyone else has eaten. They're the real men. And I think that we've kind of, well, to some degree, because we live in a world where dopamine is cheap. It's like, well, you do what feels good, right? That's a fairly modern, fairly well-accepted philosophy. Just do what feels good for you. Follow your truth. Do your thing. And I just don't think that you can ever feel satisfied and ever feel like a real man if that's what you're doing. And I think the best thing we can do is teach our boys that. And that really comes through character education.
It sounds to me like it's a question of value, and I'll try, that may not be the right word, so I'll just explain that a little bit more. It's a question of like, just because things get easier doesn't mean that you should stop contributing. In fact, theoretically, you have the opportunity to contribute more because your life is easier, right? I'm not off fighting World War III, so I'm here. What can I do, right? So why would we not be contributing more if we know that's what makes us feel good? Like if that's what makes us be a man and feel a sense of purpose and worth on the planet, and we have more time and we have more safety nets, it feels like we'd be more empowered to do more things for community good, right?
We've got cheap imitations. Like let's look at relationships for a second. And I kind of hate talking about this topic, but it's the best example that I've got. I can do the hard work of getting off my backside and going outside and inviting a couple of friends out and going on a group date and getting to know a couple of great girls and spending some time with a couple of mates at the same time and build those relationships and maybe have one of those relationships move into something that resembles or becomes intimacy. I can do that. But it takes a long time. It requires risk. There's the potential that I'm going to misstep. I might even be rejected. Or I can open up my telephone and type in any number of things and have all of the sexual stimulation that I will ever need. And it's a terribly poor imitation, but from a brain point of view, it's enough.
But it's a good example for me, because what I meant by value was exactly that. like, whilst you've simulated the experience, you haven't got any of the value. Like, the value of being in a loving relationship with a human being is a very different proposition to the value of looking at something intimate online. So maybe from a chemical release point of view in the brain, it might feel the same, but the depth of value is not there. And that's kind of what I meant before.
And that takes me back to my canary in the coal mine idea, and that is that if we have too many of our young men who are going to take the cheap dopamine, what that does is it reduces the opportunity and the options for them. And this is why we have mental health challenges at levels. So I've got a chart that I'm putting in the book. Again, I wish I'd memorized this. I didn't know we were going to have this particular conversation.
Neither did I, so we're all good.
But I've got a chart in the book. And essentially, if one gender doesn't do well, the other gender can't do well. If boys aren't doing well, our girls can't do well. Why? Because we need each other. Unfortunately, what research seems to indicate is that when it's time to partner, and let's just talk about heterosexual relationships because that's the majority relationship that exists. A female tends to partner and marry across or up in terms of a couple of things: socioeconomic factors, how much money they've got, and education factors. And those two are correlated anyway, right? Like, usually the more education you have, the more financially secure you are, and so you would expect that. Females tend to like people who are going to be their intellectual equal or higher, and they're like somebody who can provide for them. I mean, that's what men have always done, centuries and centuries of providing and protecting. And that's what they tend to do. Men, on the other hand, are quite happy to marry either across or down on those two things. And I hate using the up-down thing because it's not meant to be, look at me up on my pedestal looking down on you. It's just from an economic perspective or an intelligence perspective. So when we look at, for every 10 women who graduate high school, there are, or females, there are about 8 to 9 guys who do. For every female who is at university, there are approximately 7, between 6 and 7 males. Just that on face value tells us that there are more women, more girls and women, more females who are getting higher levels of education and who have higher career aspiration as a result and have higher earning potential. And they're looking for guys who can earn as much or more and who can eventually provide and protect if they decide that they want to have a family, because there will be an impact there. And the guys aren't doing that. The guys are dropping out of uni. The guys are if you look across the board, guys are much more likely to drink. They're much more likely to smoke. They're much more likely to take heavier drugs, ecstasy, heroin, cocaine. They're much more likely to be involved in any number of accidents. They're much more likely to have motor vehicle accidents. They're much more likely to have mental health challenges. They're vastly more likely to die by suicide, 4 times more likely to die by suicide than a female. At every element, every variable that you consider, we see this acceleration and amplification and success and progress for girls, which we should celebrate, and we do not want to take that away from them. But if we cannot help our boys to lift to that level, we're going to continue to see challenges. And what happens when a boy can't find, or a young man can't find, somebody who is interested in him, he becomes angry and he sits in his basement. I sound like I'm suddenly in America. He sits in his bedroom and he vapes or smokes pot, and he gets onto the hardcore bro manosphere chats and Discord and Telegram, and starts talking about how horrible the world is and how it's not fair, and he's not well educated, so he can't get a job that confers status, and status matters a lot to boys because it demonstrates masculinity. And all of a sudden we see this terrible spiral downwards. He lets go of his physical shape, perhaps. So he's out of shape. He's not taking care of himself physically. He's rejection sensitive, so he won't leave his room and talk to girls. He'd rather look at pornography. His education isn't improving. He's not getting... It's just like this perfect storm. Therefore what? As parents, our job is to say, we need to help you to have good male role models. We need to help you to develop the executive function necessary to regulate your emotions and to delay gratification and to stop looking for the cheap dopamine. Don't pull out your phone. Do the hard work. Get them using their bodies daily in strenuous ways, getting them to be resilient and do hard things. And when they fail at a subject in school, for example, we don't say, well, that's all right, bud, you're just bad at maths, or English is not what we do in our family, we're not really readers. We go, there's an opportunity for us to improve here. And as parents, we've got to set the example. I'm a really keen cyclist. My two sports are cycling and surfing. On the push bike, I'm one of those guys that wears the Lycra and rides the road bike, and I try to stay out of cars' ways. I don't like to be in the way. I'm off the road nice and early. But there's a saying in our home, and if I had sons, I would teach it to them just like I teach my daughters. What I've noticed is that when I'm cycling with a bunch of guys, bunch of friends, guys and girls that are out with us, if we decide that we're going to do a hills day as opposed to a flat ride, there's usually a handful of people who say, yeah, I'm out. Or they'll say, oh, I hate the hills. And I've got a saying, and that is that you've got to love the hills because the hills make you strong. If you're not willing to do the hard stuff, then you don't get the benefits of what the hard stuff brings. If I'm going to become a better cyclist, yeah, riding along the flat might be okay. It's probably pretty decent, but I get far more benefit from doing work on the hills. Yeah. In addition, if I only ride on the flats, I never get the view that comes from getting to the top of the hill. And the view is always sweeter the steeper the hill. So
how, as parents, what are a couple of practical things people can do to get kids? Because I agree with you, like adversity has been my best friend in life. I mean, I told you before about losing my partner to cancer, and people normally say I'm really sorry about that. But the truth is it was the most beautiful time of my life. Like, that's the truth. I wouldn't swap it for the world because I'm not responsible for her health outcome. And I wouldn't swap the moments. I wouldn't swap any of it. It was honestly the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life.
Yeah, so the struggles make life richer, don't
correct,
they?
Yeah. My dad always says that the purest gold comes from the hottest furnace, right? So
I like your dad more and more.
Oh yeah, his you know, the people that have calendars with quotes.
Right.
He should have his own calendar. But in any case, look, he's been a great dad to me. What are some practical things parents could do to get their kids to face, and I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but to face into adversity rather than move away from it, knowing that that's where you build your ethics in life?
Let me start with really simple, super practical. What do you talk about at dinner time with your family? So I talk regularly about the importance of high-quality dinner conversations. And the most popular one, people just love talking about what they're grateful for, grateful things. And I love that. I'm a really big supporter of the idea of let's talk about what we're grateful for, but I think we can extend it beyond that. Actually, just on grateful things, whenever we have the what are you grateful for conversation, we usually focus on all the nice things in our lives. I think that there's profound value in talking with your children when it's your turn around the table. Say, today I'm grateful that things didn't quite work out quite right with X. I'm grateful for the conflict that I had with Y. And everyone looks at you and like, hang on, but that's a bad thing. And you're like, yeah, and here's what I learned. And I'm grateful for the learning. Like that's the stuff where the kids go.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I was just thinking while you were talking about that, how my comments earlier could make other people in my life feel like I don't value them as highly as Alicia, which is just not true. Like, and I'll give you an example. As I said to you before, greatest moment in my life happened with that girl, but only because it led to other great moments. Like my relationship now with my current partner is in other ways simply the best relationship I've ever had. We're not fighting for survival. We're enjoying life. We're thriving and having a great time together. But that would have been impossible had I not gone through my earlier journey because I was not the person I am today.
The richness of that experience, in spite of the pain, makes you a better person for something. And I mean, I look at the things that I've gone through that have been hard, and with my own children, the harder the experiences have been, the more I go through hard experiences with my own children, the more I'm able to be helpful to other parents who are going through hard experiences with them.
Yeah.
I hate those hard experiences, but you got to love them because they make you stronger.
Yeah.
So I think that there's value in saying what were you grateful for today. It's a tremendous conversation, but there's also value in having broader discussions, like we're talking about resilience here or doing hard things. One of my favorite questions to ask my kids around the dinner table is, what did you do that was hard today?
Yeah.
What did you do that showed delayed gratification? What did you do that showed that you were willing to think of others? And so I ask those questions. How did you make a contribution to somebody else's benefit today? And those kinds of questions, this is explicit discussions about how we're instilling value in the lives of other people, how we're becoming better people. And then mum and dad always go last in our family. We get the kids to talk first, and then we share our ones. And we relish the opportunity to talk about how we failed, or we're grateful for that really hard thing, or this is what I did that was hard today. We want the kids to be thinking about it. You put it front and center. To me, that's the most practical thing that you can do. The second thing, I'll give you a handful of them.
Sure.
Second thing, if you really want your kids to develop that character and to be willing to do hard things, is when they're going through it, they will often come to you and say, I'm out, I don't want to do it, it's too hard, I hate my brother, my school teacher doesn't know what they're on about, playing soccer, cricket, netball, rowing, rock climbing, bouldering, surfing, whatever the activity is, I don't like it anymore. And at that point, we usually, as parents, get really logical and say, let me explain to you why this matters. We want you to play the piano because it's going to be a gift that you'll have for the rest of your life. And in that moment, our children are emotional and they don't care about the logic. They're trying to have an emotional conversation and you're trying to have a rational, logical conversation. There's a phrase that I use all the time, and that is that high emotions equals low intelligence. If your child is really, really emotional, they will not be open to anything that resembles intelligence and logic and perception. They're myopic. They're focused on their own stuff. And it's the same with you as a parent, by the way. Like when your kids are driving you crazy and you are emotional, you will do and say things that are irrational and unhelpful.
Well, it takes us back to the first story you told about nap time, right?
Exactly.
Everyone's emotional. No one's getting anywhere.
Making stupid decisions. Yeah. Therefore, when our child comes to us and they are emotional, they want to have an emotional conversation, which means we don't worry about the logic. We just say, I get it. I get it. And maybe the most helpful thing that we can say to our children in that situation is, I'm here. Like we don't even need to, like my dad said to me when I wasn't emotional, but I was trying to work out, do I or don't I pursue this idea that I've got for a business, whatever that even looks like. He just said, I'm here for you.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that in so many ways. When I've, like as a father, the last thing you expect is your son to come home and say, Dad, I've fallen in love with a girl and she has cancer, right? And my dad's a high achiever and I was petrified of having that conversation because it was super important to me, but it was also important that I had his support and I wasn't sure if those things would align. And I said to him at the dinner table, Dad, I have to tell you something. I've fallen in love with a girl and she has cancer. Pause. And he just looks at me and he says, whatever you need from me, I'm here for you, right? And the weight of the world was lifted because he was there for me. And I had a chat to a lady in this room yesterday who was having an extremely bad day. And she got on a bus and she lost all her care for what the world thought of her because she was emotionally distraught. So she was just crying uncontrollably on a bus. And a man, most people obviously avoided the situation. One man got on the bus, walked over and said, do you mind if I sit next to you? And she said, you can sit next to me. And he sat down and she told him about her day, which involved domestic violence and a lot of bad things. And he just said to her, he said, I want you to know two things. I want you to know, A, you're not alone, and B, you'll get through this. And from those words, she started a charity, and she now, his legacy lives through, she doesn't even know his name, but his actions that day by just being emotional with her. Like he didn't try to solve any of her problems. He just sat there in an emotional state with her, told her some very simple truths, and that inspired her to start a charity and help hundreds, if not thousands of other people. So when you're saying to me, if someone wants an emotional conversation, just meet them at that level. It really resonates, especially now because of my chat yesterday. But yeah.
It's such a perfect story, perfect illustration of what I'm saying. And here's the thing. Once she calmed down, she was able to then figure out for herself what the appropriate way was to move forward. And our children will do the same thing. Once they've calmed down from their dummy spit or their really worked up emotion, they will start to breathe again and then they'll start to think about it. And if we feel like we need to be the prefrontal cortex a little bit because we are the adult and they are the child and they might do something rash or something that's not the best idea, we get to say to them, what are you thinking? And why don't we talk that through? And what other options do we have? So we can have the logical conversation later. But if you want to have resilient kids, if you want to have kids that are able to figure this stuff out, the first thing that we've got to do is get those emotions down, get them low. And we don't have to do it in a, this is my goal, is to get your emotions under control. Rather, the thing we're really trying to do is say, I'm here and I see you. Again, connection, seeing, feeling seen, heard and valued. If there was one more thing that I would say, it's kind of going to be a little bit counter to that, or maybe it's the flow on of that, and that is to explicitly teach the kids you've got to love the hills. It's to talk to them about the hard things in life and how you are who you are because of the hard things. Like it's that simple. We become who we are. We become the best versions of ourselves, not by laying on a beach in Bali and sipping cocktails and mocktails all day long. You do that for a week, it's bliss. You do that for a fortnight, you start to get a bit antsy towards the end of the fortnight. You do that for 6 months, it's like, come on. I got to do something. I'm ready. I'm champing at the bit. And helping the kids to identify that in their lives. How does it feel when you're not doing anything? Now let me put a caveat around this. There's a wonderful quote, it's been around for decades, I don't know who said it, that play is the work of childhood. So when you see your children playing, please don't feel like you need to get them into a productivity and progress mindset. That's not what it's about. As they become adolescents and start to move towards a different level of brain development.
Send them to a barbecue with you, is what I'm hearing.
Send them to the army, I don't care. But we want them to start to have a future orientation. But for our kids, especially under about 12, 13 years of age, they do not need a future orientation. That's the one thing that I love about most kids is they are so present, they're so grounded, they're just in the moment. They don't really care about the future. Like the future is this weekend.
Yeah.
When they're going to hang out with their friends again.
Yeah.
You talk to them. Do you remember being 14 and seeing a guy who was maybe 24 and just thinking, can't imagine being 24. Like 24 is so ancient. That is so old. Yeah. Your brain doesn't go there. It hasn't developed sufficiently to be able to perceive what the future really is.
Yeah, I have a great mum, and one of the things my mum used to do when I was a little boy, like a primary school age kid, she would tell me all about my grandfather. And I worry, because she would tell me, like he moved over here as an immigrant from England. Yeah. And he was a lumberjack. He later became a preacher, but he was a lumberjack when he got here. And he moved to Perth, and they went to southwest Australia, and they literally lived in the forest because this is pre-development as we know it today,
such
right?
Such a beautiful part of the world as well.
Oh, it's amazing.
Oh, I love it there.
But they lived in tents and they worked with mules and horses and they ate potatoes only and they had no money and they cut down these big trees with hand saws and literally physically dragged them out on horses and mule. And she wasn't necessarily giving me a future orientation, but she was teaching me the value of where I came from and hard work by expressing to me what my ancestors had done. This is your heritage. This is my heritage. And what occurs to me today is that she would tell me those stories in the uncomfortable down times, like driving to school, dinner time, bedtime. These days, those moments don't exist because there's some form of technology available to you.
We're either too busy or screens
all
are in our
the
lives.
time, right? So how important, I guess, and I'm sorry to digress from your final point, but I do think it's part of it. How important is it for parents to find the time to pass on these stories so that they're not lost? Because I almost feel like learning from history is almost better than trying to project a future on a child that they could have, because that's conceptual, whereas this is actually what my grandfather did or my grandmother did.
There are two things in answer to the question. The first thing that I want to emphasize is a little bit of a tangent, but it relates to downtime. For us to develop an identity, we have to consider who we are. That requires us to have the time to let our brain be quiet. There's a part of our brain that's known as the DMN, the default mode network. That part of the brain tends to switch on, that is, it's in default, it's a default mode, when we're not occupied. And that's the part of our brain that helps us to think about, why am I here? What am I trying to do? What's life all about? Who am I interested in? Who am I not interested in? What are my values? What matters to me? How should I act in that situation next time? That's the default mode network, and it's thinking through all the stuff that life gives us. The great challenge, I think, going back to the cheap dopamine conversation, the great challenge that I think we face is that we don't have downtime anymore. There's always a screen, there's always stimulation, there's always cheap dopamine on offer somewhere, and our brains don't get the quiet time. I was talking to my wife about this, and I said to her, I had snuck up on her in the supermarket, and she was in line waiting to go through the checkout. She was on a phone. And I said, do you remember what we used to do when we were in line for the checkout before we had phones? And she looked at me quizzically, really puzzled, and she was like, not really. And I said, nothing. And do you remember what we used to do when we stopped at the traffic lights? Nothing. Now, of course, not that we're supposed to, but you see people checking their phones because they've got 45 seconds to the light turn screen. Or what we did at a bus stop, or what we did, all of these moments of time confetti. These, anything from 30 seconds through to maybe 12 minutes or something like that. These moments where there's nothing to do. Now, we've got something to do, and we do, and so do the kids. But a decade and a half ago, you know what we did was nothing. And when we did nothing, our default mode network kicked in, and it started to ask that internal dialogue. What's going on? What am I thinking about? What am I curious about? What am I interested in? What are my values? We've got to get back to that. The longer we can delay a phone in our children's lives, the more likely it is that they're going to be resilient and well-grounded. As soon as you give them a phone, you give them a portal to the world. And as soon as you give them a phone, the phone becomes the center of their world, and we become peripheral. My advice is play-based childhood, as much default mode network activation time as possible by having nothing to do and letting kids just play and be kids. Now, that's the tangent. Let me go back to your specific story. Your mum telling you of the cultural and ancestral heritage that comes through your family. When you asked me what builds resilient kids, the first thing I was going to say, I decided not to because I thought it might be a little bit too long and a little bit too airy-fairy and a little bit too psycho-babbly.
This is the longest chat I've ever had in this room, so that's out the window.
Sorry.
I'm loving it. Chats go for a long time because they're great, so I'm loving it.
Well, the first thing I was going to say, and then I swapped it to get really practical, is you become a resilient person. You become a person who can push through hard things. You become a person who is able to adapt positively to dysfunction and challenge in your life and grow through it in healthy ways. That's resilience, right? You become a person whose capacity to cope with the stresses of life grows because of the stresses of life when you know who you are. One of the best predictors of a resilient person is their sense of personal identity. The great challenge is that we don't start to go through an identity development process until we're in our mid to late teens. That's when we start to think about who we really are. Therefore, how do you help a 6-year-old or a 9-year-old or even a 12-year-old for that matter work out who they are? I mean, I talk to plenty of 30 and 40 and 50-year-olds who say, I'm still trying to figure it out. And the answer is you teach them whose they are. For those with a faith background, that's very easy because you start talking about spiritual things and creators of the universe. For those without a faith background, or with or without a faith background, you talk about your own family and you tell stories about your grandparents and your great-grandparents and your own stories. You help them to know the family they've come from. You teach them about their cultural or their racial heritages or their religious foundations. You teach them about where you grew up, where their grandparents grew up, how they met, how the proposal occurred, what happened at the wedding, what was the deal with that maniac Uncle Frank or Uncle Ross who used to go and surf those big waves and take on those challenges, or Auntie Maud who went and started that business and did all of those crazy things because she had the fortitude and the foresight and the capacity to see a need, and that's why she's done so well in life. You teach them about how you went from not being able to run to the letterbox to doing a PB on the weekend in park run and doing the best 5K you've ever done. You teach them those things. And what happens is they start to develop their identity based on the roots you give them. as we've talked, you've talked about your mum, you've talked about your dad a couple of times, and now you've told me a bit about your grandparents and your forebears and the incredible work that they've done. And that creates identity. Marshall Duke, Emory University professor, looking at kids with and without disabilities. And what he found with all these kids coming through his lab, when he gave them a questionnaire and said, do you know? And then he asks all these questions about their family and their family history. Simple questions like the things I've just talked to you about and you've shared with me. The more that kids could say yes to those questions, the more likely it was that they would score high on resilience and get better outcomes in the clinic. The more they said no to those questions, the more they showed a lack of resilience, maladaptive coping, and did poorly both in and outside of the clinic. Identity formation, identity development is at the very core. It's so vital for helping our kids to be resilient and to learn to love the hills. Speaking of, I mean, you show me a person on a bike going up a hill, and I can tell you everything about their character from how they do that, or the way they respond to a park run and having to get that distance. The physical attributes of persistence and determination tend to be a pretty good indicator of how people are when they confront other challenges and difficulties like a relationship breakdown or a school exam failure or not getting the part in the school play that was so important to them. When we teach them who they are by the conversations around the dinner table and at bedtime and the family history stuff. It doesn't even have to be deep. On family history, some people roll their eyes and go, oh, come on, like what are you talking about? Just your family stories.
Absolutely. And they can be quite simple.
Totally. Like your grandpa used to chop down trees and lug them out of the forest.
Like in fairness, none of my grandparents did anything like there's no astronauts in our family, right? But they did amazing things. Like just to hear about both my grandfathers went to World War II, one as a doctor and one as a soldier. But just to know that the sacrifices they made so that I can sit here and talk to you today.
It's a legacy.
Just that. I don't need to know anything more about their military service than they actually went and made a sacrifice. And I wasn't even born, but I'm benefiting from that. So if I didn't know that would weaken me as a person because I would be less grateful for who I am and the opportunities that I have simply because I don't know. And yeah, so I'm very grateful that I got those lessons. And like I said, these aren't like lots of grandparents did that. I'm not unique in that sense, but I know what happened and I'm grateful for the stories.
Well, they're the action steps. Talk to your kids at the table, help them to persist through hard things, respond to their emotions in ways that are responding to the emotion and not dealing with the broader problem until later, and teaching them about who they really are.
Look, you've certainly found your passion. And it's been an absolute pleasure. I
feel like we've only been talking for 10 minutes.
I know, I feel the same, but I know it's been a long chat and I appreciate your time, and I know the listeners will appreciate all the things that you've shared as well. So thank you very much.
Good on you. Thanks, Brendan.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Legacy Collective podcast. Copyright by School Fun Run. Today's episode was brought to you by Funzy. You can find out more at funzy.com.au. And if you'd like to access other podcasts, we produce one called Chase the Fun. It's narrated by Chase the Cheetah, and it's made specifically for kids in primary school to help them develop characters to become the best human beings they can be. See you in the next episode.